to Mr. Taylor's point, and maybe we should start looking at breaking it down per judge. Because some judges just have a burr about probation revocations and believe that being on probation is your chance.
Face it to the audience, or do you want them to stand like this?
Face the audience.
You need to meet these guys. Kurt, I bet you heard a lot about you. Kurt McGahee, how are you? You started doing this.
It's like bad stuff. This is like, just 2 years ago, I stood on the main line and rebuked all these things, and they laughed me out.
This ain't over yet either. It's a real deal.
If Shaw's gonna love me, I need Elliot was not going to run the city, but I think I can do it. If I walk this one back, I know I can.
I do too.
I have no plans.
Because he will back. There's no way he'll go back. No way. No way. This is crazy, but yeah, let's do that. Come 8:30. Let's do that. Hey, I can show you.
I've been coming. We've been to 2 so far. My wife came. She loves you, by the way.
Oh yeah.
You told her, she's like, I like that guy. Awesome.
Hey,
She's a good people reader.
Oh, is she?
Oh yeah.
Well, hey, we're just authentic, and that's it. 'Cause, man, I'm telling you, this is my list of voicemails, and I have zeroed it. This is what this thing's been doing.
Thank you.
I would
Testing.
like in a day or two.
Testing.
Happen, and I
You can. Welcome, everyone. If you can please start to find a seat. We're going to get started on time. It's got a lot of good info that our solicitors are going to share tonight. If voting people can please sit in the center and in front of those 10 rows. No, she's. Just about ready to get started, so if you can please find a seat. It is 7:00 p.m. on the dot. We are officially called to order. Welcome, everyone, to our first business meeting of 2024. I hope you all feel very lucky to be in your positions for this year, because we expect this to be a momentous year for the country with everything we have to get done. So with that, I would like to start with our opening prayer. It's with Gregory Peck of Tubbs Mountain, EC.
I'm going to open with a passage of Scripture, Proverbs 9, verses 7 through 9, and then read a little bit of an exposition by Tim Keller before the prayer. The prayer will be short. Whoever corrects a scoffer gets himself abuse, and he who reproves a wicked man incurs injury. Do not reprove a scoffer, or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he will still be wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. Tim Keller writes in this, life rebukes us through the hard knocks of trials and troubles, which show us our weaknesses and foolishness. Friends help us grow through the bracing love of correction. These are the two versions of wisdom's main teaching. The comeuppance. The further you go down the road of folly, the more you interpret all events as supporting what you have believed anyway. And when things go wrong, you blame others and circumstances for your problems. This hardens your heart rather than softens it, and makes you less open to counsel than ever. Instruct the wise, and they will be wiser still. But try to tell the mocker anything, and it will make him worse than before you tried. In the New Testament, Jesus laid out this principle. Whoever has will be given more. The more wisdom you have, the more you will gain in every turn in the road of life. The less wisdom that you have, the less you will learn from anything. So learn from your mistakes and criticisms at all costs. When was the last time you let someone or something change your mind about a significant issue? Let's pray. Lord, our Heavenly Father, when things go wrong or I do wrong, please help me drop all my defenses. And that applies to all of us here. My blame shifting and my self-justifications. These are the tools of fools. Like a soldier, let me say to you, no excuse, sir, and learn what I should learn. Help me start with what happened yesterday. Help me to live out the instruction of the great confessions in that I am to glorify you and only you. Amen.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ray. And so we now have, for the Pledge of Allegiance, a duo of Keith and Joanna Jones. So if you could please, the flag is there, if you could please rise and join us. And Susanna, are you here? Susanna Sarabia? Thank you. You're good. Susanna, who is she's going to read our Republican Creed for us, and she's the Thornblade EC. Can you have a microphone there, or you want to borrow this one?
Good evening. It's a great day to be in South Carolina. The South Carolina Republican Creed. I do not choose to be a common man. It is my right to be an uncommon. If I seek opportunity, not security, I want to take the calculated risk to dream and build, to fail and to succeed. I refuse to barter incentive for dole. I prefer the challenges of life to guaranteed security, the thrill of fulfillment to the state calm of utopia. I will not trade freedom for beneficence, nor my dignity for a handout. I will never cower before any master save my God. It is my heritage to stand erect, proud, and unafraid, to think and act for myself, enjoy the benefit of my creations, to face the whole world boldly and say, I am a free American.
Thank you very much, Susanna. Well, thank you, everyone. We want to get right to our speakers, but before we do that, I'd like to welcome any elected officials besides our two speakers. If you're in the audience, please stand. If there are any, and also veterans and their families, if you would also stand briefly, if we have any veterans in the audience. So, wonderful, thank you. Woo. Thank you for being here as well. And then just a reminder on our meeting calendar, join us for Coffee and Politics, check out the events calendar. And with that, I'm going to turn the mic over to our state EC, Jeff Davis, who will introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I promised these guys we'd get them started as fast as possible, so I'm going to keep their bios quick and easy. But we have two speakers tonight that I think will blow your mind of the information that they have to put out there for us. Judicial reform is one of the biggest issues going on down at the State House right now. And I will tell you, every lawyer out there would have told you this would never happen. And we have the ability to push this forward. I think this needs to be a major issue that we're pushing. And we have the two speakers. We got David Pascoe, Solicitor for the First Judicial Circuit. Mr. Pascoe has been the solicitor down there since 2005, the elected solicitor. And we have Kevin Brackett out of the 16th Judicial Circuit. Kevin has been there since 2006, I believe. These guys have been in the courtroom day after day with solicitors or assistant solicitors working for them and being pushed back by the lawyer legislators and seeing what's actually going out there. So without a further ado, I want to hand it over to Mr. Pascoe and Solicitor Brackett. Thanks, sir.
Imagine that, I got to lower it. Well, Greenville, I'm back. I'm back, and I brought a token Republican with me this time, Kevin Brackett from York County, okay? Yeah. He's a Republican, and he gives me some street cred in Mauldin, South Carolina. What a great crowd tonight. I was just joking with Kevin before we came up here. I said, you know, with this big crowd and we're in a church, I kind of feel compelled to pass out a collection plate. So if you see it, in my accountant, Jeff Davis said cash only, okay? Doesn't want me going in a higher tax bracket. Judicial reform. The world is now paying attention, but it all started here in Greenville County 2 years ago. Bobby Kennedy once talked about that tiny ripple of hope that eventually can build a current that can sweep down and create change. Well, that ripple, ladies and gentlemen, started here in Greenville County. I mean, to their credit, there were some legislators out there before 2 years ago who talked about we need a different way of picking judges. There were editorial boards out there and people in the editorial world like Will Folks talking about different ways of picking judges. But the first ripple for reform, and the first time we heard the term reform, was here in Greenville County on January the 6th, 2002. And today we finally have a current that's going to bring change, and that's because of you. I believe that we're going to get some form of judicial reform soon. It won't be close to perfect. It's not going to be close to perfect, but it's going to be a start, and we're heading in the right direction. And when we do get better sweeping reform, that's when David Pascoe will go away. That's when I won't give any more presentations and I won't expose any more corruption and self-interest. But until then, I'm not going anywhere. And that's why I'm back tonight. And I sincerely want to thank you for inviting us here, because it was once again not without controversy and backlash. Just like 2 years ago, the Greenville GOP is being criticized for having me here tonight. I've listened to the radio shows. I've read the online articles. I've been told what your state chairman about his dissatisfaction. I've been called everything from the devil, the grim reaper of the General Assembly, a liar, mean, a Democrat. Some of it true, some of it untrue. But let me promise you this, after tonight, there's one thing they won't be able to call me, and that's a rhino. Let's talk about the one Republican article that I did read out of the Times-Examiner. And I want to thank the Times-Examiner because they saved me some serious embarrassment. I almost wore that exact same tie tonight. And that would have caused some controversy if I had done that. It had some misinformation in there about me, and it called upon you to rescind your invitation. I'm not going to address all the misrepresentations it made about me because we're going to stay focused tonight on one issue: judicial reform. But I am going to address one false implication it makes concerning me, because it does concern judicial reform, and it's about the judicial candidacy of Democrat James Smith. How many people are familiar about that? I'm just curious. Show of hands. Okay, good. Almost everybody. Good. The article implies, and the quote is up there, that I support Mr. Smith's candidacy, and it goes on to say, quote, "Then Mr. Pascoe is absolutely the wrong person to speak to Republicans about judicial reform." Guess what? I agree. That statement is absolutely true if the facts were true. But the answer, Times-Examiner, as to whether Democrat David Pascoe supports James Smith's candidacy is no. I do not support his judicial candidacy, so I guess I am the perfect person to come here today and talk to you about judicial reform. I'm not supporting his candidacy because he is a former former lawyer legislator, and I'm sick and tired of cronyism up at the State House. I'm tired of it. I think the last thing we need, when we're about to talk to you, Kevin and I, about the preferential treatment lawyer legislators get in the courthouses right now, the last thing we need is one of their own on the bench. So I oppose his candidacy. I also think, along with a lot of other Democrats, I might add, and some Republicans, to their credit, who are fighting James Smith's candidacy, that we need more black lawyers on the bench and more diversity on the bench, as we're going to talk about, which is another reason why I oppose James Smith. Next. Oh, but before I forget, I'm glad, thank you, Baker, for the reminder. While I don't support his candidacy, guess who does support James Smith's candidacy? Republicans, especially lawyer legislator Republicans. And so what I don't understand is, why aren't the chairman of your party and the Times-Examiner and others calling out those Republicans? I know at least one statewide elected official, Republican, lobbying the legislature right now to get James Smith elected as a judge. He is calling General Assembly members, lobbying to get Smith elected as a judge. Yet I guess for certain Republicans or rhinos, they'd rather spread misinformation about me than call out their own. And I'd like to know, where is your representative? How many people have Bruce Bannister as their representative? Bunch of hands. I'd like to know where he is on this issue. Who's he going to represent? Because I know, or who's he going to support? Because I know who he didn't support. He didn't support James Smith's opponent. And there's at least one state Republican senator from the Low Country, Tom Davis. He's in the newspaper. And that article behind me where he supports James Smith. Next. And again, that's James Smith. He's a decent guy. I saw him a couple weeks ago, gave him a half hug and a handshake. And I appreciate his service to our country. But because he's a former lawyer legislator, and because I have misgivings about his relationships with certain legislators, I do not support him for the judiciary. This is the person that I supported. Justin Smith. Or Justin Williams, thank you. Justin Williams. I promised my best friend before he had passed away, a guy by the name of Stanley Myers, that I would give Justin any advice I could to help him try to get elected. But the reason I actually supported Justin Williams is because he's a former prosecutor. He's more conservative than Smith. I genuinely felt he would be less biased on the bench than James Smith. I genuinely feel he has more experience to be a judge because James Smith admitted to the JMSC that we're going to talk about that he hadn't practiced law in the last 5 years, but they felt the need to find him qualified to be a judge. And Justin happens to be an African American. And as I told you, I believe that we need more minorities on the bench. And this was a golden opportunity to put a very qualified, somewhat conservative African American on the court. But our General Assembly appears to choose cronyism over merit. Justin Williams dropped out of the race. Yes, he was worried about retribution from legislators if he stayed in the race. He told me that himself. But ladies and gentlemen, the main reason he got out was because of Republican leadership. Both houses, Senate and the House of Representatives, Republicans in leadership would not commit to him. So technically, in practicality, the Republican leadership supported James Smith because he's now unopposed because Republicans wouldn't support Justin. So to all those rhinos who asked you to rescind your invitation of me, I asked them to put their money where their mouth is and show that they have some principle and call out members of their own party for who they support for judicial candidates. Winston Churchill once said, some change their party for the sake of principle, others their principles for the sake of their party. I'm not going to change my core principles for any party or any person, period. And look, we have some great Republicans and Democrats in the General Assembly, and we have some with core principles, and they abide by those principles. But we also have some who are just like Churchill's latter part of that statement. But worst of all, we have some that have no principles whatsoever. They're only up there for one thing, to be a part of the good old boy system, to make friends. But the reason I love to speak to Republican groups like yourself and Democratic Party groups across this state is that when I do, I'm reaching out to people with unwavering principles. It doesn't matter whether I'm talking to the Democrats in Dorchester County, the Republicans in Orangeburg, or the Republicans in Greenville. What I find is that these people, the activists in the party, they have unwavering principles, and that voters in both parties are sick and tired of cronyism, nepotism, and corruption. Corruption and inefficient government are bipartisan problems, and the only way we're going to combat it is through a bipartisan effort. I believe that our biggest problem revolves around how we select our judges. We need immediate judicial reform in South Carolina. As most or all of you know, we're one of only 2 states where the legislature elects the judges, but in our state, our legislature doesn't even vote on the judge until after an opaque screening process called the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. the JMSC. And I'm going to go into that in more detail in a minute. In short, this JMSC process that we have right now allows a select few lawyer legislators to exercise tremendous power in the selection of all of our state's judges. The same judges, by the way, those lawyer legislators then go practice law in front of. They hire the judges. They have the power to fire the judges, yet they get to go and practice law in front of them. How fair is that? Not at all, exactly. A simple piece of legislation will eradicate this problem, but it is being fought like you would not believe by lawyer legislators on both sides of the aisle. Y'all, the Democrats, the lawyer legislators in the Democratic Party are every bit as worse or bad at this as the Republicans are when it comes to fighting judicial reform. And why are they fighting simple reform so hard? In my opinion, it's because a handful of lawyer legislators enjoy being treated as a privileged class in our judicial system. And as I've said many times, when politically connected individuals are treated as a privileged class by members of our judiciary, it erodes public trust in government and the fair administration of the law. If anyone needs proof that public confidence is waning and that we need legislation now, when did you ever think you'd see David Pascoe, Alan Wilson, and 40 sheriffs and solicitors of both parties together on an issue? I mean, Alan Wilson and David Pascoe on the same stage, that is a Christmas miracle, okay? But we agree on this issue, and we've come together, all of us, over 40 solicitors and sheriffs. And the only reason a lot of our solicitors and sheriffs friends that weren't there, Democrat and Republican, was because they had other things to do. But we all agree on judicial reform. And all we're asking is that lawyer legislators be removed from the JMSC, as I'm going to talk about in a minute. That's it. Nothing major. But unfortunately, it's being fought. And I'm reminded by what the Gipper once said. Politics is the second oldest profession, but it bears a very close resemblance to the first. He's right. But what we need is politicians not in love with money, but politicians in love with justice. The cornerstone of our republic is that we have three independent branches of government. Y'all learned that in third grade. The executive, legislative, and judicial branch. But arguably in South Carolina, we don't have an independent judiciary. We have a judicial branch that is hired. You can go to the next slide, Shake. That is hired, fired, and solely funded by the legislature. In South Carolina, next slide, all of our judges, almost all of our judges are elected in the legislature. Other than summary court judges and probate judges, all of them are elected in the legislature. That's family court, circuit court, court of appeals, and Supreme Court. Elected in the legislature. And before there can even be a vote on them in the legislature, they have to go before the JMSC. The JMSC has 10 members, and this is where we are calling for most of our reform. The JMSC has 10 members. All 10 of them are appointed by the legislature, 5 by the Senate, 5 by the House. 3 of the Senate members that are appointed are lawyer legislators. 3 in the House are lawyer legislators. So now you have not only all 10 members appointed by the legislature, but 6 of the 10, a majority, are lawyer legislators. They decide whether someone is qualified or not, and whether they can even run for judge in the legislature. They decide that. Currently, the chairman of the JMSC is a Republican, Micah Caskey, out of Lexington County, and the vice chairman is a Republican out of Horry County named Luke Rankin. There are judicial races, and I think before I go to that, and there's the current list of all the JMSC members. And by the way, I'm going to make sure, well, Greenville has, y'all have my PowerPoint and Kevin's PowerPoint. I want to make sure everybody gets it emailed to them, okay? Because I want y'all to have all this, and I want you to have their numbers and their names. But those are the 10 members of the JMSC. There are judicial races taking place right now as we speak. The current JMSC has recently screened out candidates, found some candidates unqualified just in the last month. And there are, like I said, races actually where judges or candidates are actually going up to the State House every day and trying to get people to commit for them, get General Assembly members to commit to their candidacy. And let me just tell you this. The way the screening and the races have gone up till now, well, it's just the gift that keeps on giving. Even with people watching, there are shenanigans. In my opinion, the JMSC system is rotten to the core. And I'm not saying that the people are rotten or that the people are corrupt. But the system breeds an appearance of corruption. Let me give you just one recent example of what I mean, what took place just in the last few weeks. The JMSC's main job is just to give an up or down on whether someone's qualified or not. It's not their job to pick winners and losers. But unfortunately, that's what they're doing. They'll find whoever they want qualified, even if that person hasn't practiced law in the last 5 years. But they'll find others unqualified to make sure they can't run for judge. And that's not their job. This is a Charleston attorney by the name of Brett Halverson. I didn't even know him before 6 months ago. He filed to run for circuit court judge against an incumbent judge in Charleston, an incumbent judge who I had spoken out against on many occasions. He didn't need to be a judge, in my opinion. Well, Brent Halverson ran against him, and he is absolutely qualified to be a judge. In fact, in my opinion, he's at least as qualified as over half of the people that were found qualified by the JMSC. But guess who the JMSC didn't want to be able to run for judge? And guess who the JMSC was mad at because he wouldn't drop out? And that's what they usually want you to do, is drop out. Brett Halverson. So without even taking a vote, which is against their own rules and quite frankly bizarre, they find Brent Halverson unqualified. Now, and I know some people are going to object to this next video I'm going to send you or get you to watch, but it's from a very meek, mild, and uncontroversial state senator talking about the JMSC, and I'm going to play it for you in Brent Halverson's race, because I got to tell you, I couldn't have said this about the JMSC any better myself.
Senator from Richland, Senator Pulliam, what purpose do you ask?
Mr. President, I'd ask to be able to speak to a matter of personal interest.
You're recognized for a point of personal interest, up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many of you, I'm sure, noticed that we've got a report this morning in our boxes from the JMSC on their newest round of hearings and determining, and it was a draft report. And what was amazing to me, I've been following this issue, if you haven't noticed, the JMSC and whether or not we should reform it, is that at least in one instance, and I think I've counted 4 different violations of the law by the JMSC, 4, and it's a fascinating story. There was an incumbent circuit judge named Bentley Price, and Bentley Price was opposed by a guy named Brent Halverson. I've met Mr. Halverson, very nice guy. I know Judge Price, very nice guy. I don't have as we say, a dog in this fight. But what I do have is an interest that this process be conducted in an apolitical, fair fashion, and this did not. Price had a number, apparently, complaints, and as a result, could not garner the votes to get recommended. There was a vote held according, in this report, there's no vote recorded, but members of the JMSC told the Post and Courier that he got a 5-5 vote, which is not enough to be found qualified. As a result, he withdrew. So it left Mr. Halverson. Now, Mr. Halverson, under the statute, what happens is when an incumbent judge is found not qualified or withdraws, there's no election. It's carried over, reopened, people can apply. But apparently, because Mr. Halverson had the gumption to run against an incumbent judge, the JMSC went out of their way in breaking the law to find him not qualified. Now, they couldn't find him not qualified without a vote, and the vote has to be recorded as to who voted how. No vote. and they made findings based on my knowledge, not based on facts. What happened is, because he had the gumption to run against an incumbent judge, the Merit Selection Committee, and that really is a misnomer, Merit Selection Committee decided to gut him, to find him not qualified. And ladies and gentlemen, we have pending in Judiciary Committee 3 separate bills that would at least begin the process of discussing this. This report is an abomination. It's a violation of the law. And as somebody who practices in front of judges, I got to tell you, it scares me that these folks are the ones that decide who gets voted on by us. So I bring this to your attention this morning because this is an abomination. This is an outrage. It's a violation of the law. These are legislators breaking the law to pick the people who will interpret the law. I mean, does it get any more dystopian than this? So please, let's do something now about changing this process. And let me say this to you. I'm not for the governor appointing. I'm not necessarily for all lawyer legislators being eliminated. There are things we can do that will change this process, make it fair, more transparent, more open, and give all of us and the public confidence that the people that are picked to judge and interpret the law are picked based on their ability, not on who they know. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Richland. Senator from Greenville, Senator Corbin, what purpose do you rise, sir?
Senator, yield for a question.
Senator yields for a question.
Senator, did you know?
An outrage, abomination, 4 violations of the law in the Judicial Merit Selection Commission. That is a misnomer because it's not about merit. From a very meek state senator, someone who's never had any controversy in his life, right? I mean, if anybody knows about a violation of law, I would think it's Murdaugh's lawyer, right? But so let me ask you this. Where are the other lawyers in the Senate standing up for what's right? Where's Luke Rankin? Where's his buddy Gerald Malloy? It seems like Harpootlian and Senator Wes Clymer from York are the only senators that I hear even making noise about judicial reform, real noise in the last several months. And Wes Clymer is not a lawyer. The lawyers in the General Assembly, and that's where we need your help. You've got to push them to do the right thing. The lawyers in the General Assembly have no desire to have judicial reform. Where is the Republican Majority Leader, Shane Massey? And we're going to talk about Republican Majority Leader Shane Massey a little bit because he is a lawyer. Last year, when we had that big press conference, when we had that press conference with over 40 law enforcement officers in favor of judicial reform, Shane Massey said that he was satisfied with how judges were picked in South Carolina. And I was disappointed in that. And I'll tell you, one reason I was disappointed is because I knew that he supposedly didn't say that 3 years earlier. Keep this in mind when I tell you about the next story with Shane Massey. In South Carolina, it's against the rules. Heck, it's against the law if you vote swap in judicial races, okay? It's against the law. It's against the law to make deals of you vote for this judge and I'll vote for that judge. Keep that in mind. Because back in 2020, when it was an election year, and what is this year, by the way? Yeah, they're going to listen to you guys, all right? They're going to listen hard. But back in 2020, he was at a town hall, and he admitted that there were problems with the way we picked our judges. And he had this conversation with this person, and this audio has been out for a while now. Listen to what he says about races up at the State House and the problems with judicial races at the State House.
They are very protective of their candidates. And there is a lot of vote swapping that goes on in the House on that. I don't like the way that goes down. I I don't know how you. I mean, that's a tough one to fix if you're going to have a legislature electing judges.
Well, I'll tell you what, pass judicial reform, Senator Massey, and take care of that problem. That's how you take care of it. So even Senator Massey knows that there's an appearance of impropriety in how we select our judges, right? But he's not doing anything about it. Is that principle or is that good old boy system? Is that principle or cronyism? Recently, he had some very interesting excuses as to why we don't have more diversity on the bench and why we're the only state in the union that does not have a woman on the Supreme Court. Excuses as to why we lack diversity. This is why Senator Massey says we lack diversity on our bench. He criticized the state's law schools and bar association for not better preparing women and African American attorneys to be judges. He then said, but they have to want to be judge. If we have good candidates, I think we pick good judges. Blaming the law school and the bar, not the General Assembly. Unfortunately, he's about to get called out on that. In fact, he was called out right after those statements by my good friend, a solicitor down in the Ninth Circuit, Scarlett Wilson. She and I have been friends for over 30 years. She's a Republican solicitor in the Ninth Circuit. And she said that Senator Massey's comments were malarkey. They're an attempt to shift the blame from the legislature's all too political judicial elections. The veteran solicitor says there's a good reason more minority and women lawyers don't bother running for judgeships. Quote, they watch as the goalposts are moved to accommodate the friends and family of legislators while keeping other qualified candidates out. And it's not in the actual election where most of the shenanigans occur. It's in the days and weeks leading up to it by the intimidation of candidates to drop out. They moved the goalposts for family members. I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm going to anyway. Do you know whose spouses, the last two chairmen of the South Carolina Judiciary, guess whose spouses have been elected to the bench? Theirs. Is that nepotism, cronyism, or merit? Solicitor Wilson called him out on that. That's a bunch of malarkey about why we don't have more women and more blacks on the bench. And I'm going to give you some inside baseball about what really set her off and why we believe he's being very disingenuous when he says he'd support basically conservative minority candidates if they were conservative. This is Tamika Leggett. She ran for judge 3 years ago. She is a conservative prosecutor. We had an opportunity when she ran for judge to put a black female on the bench. She is so conservative, though, that when word got out that she prayed before the presidential election, she admitted it. She prayed and decided to vote for Donald Trump. And because of that, a lot of Democrats and members of the Black Caucus did not vote for her. And guess what? I understand that. That is their principle. I get that. And who knows? Maybe the fact that she voted for Donald Trump is why. You paying attention, Baker? Why they didn't vote for her. The Republican leadership, Merle Smith, Luke Rankin, and yes, Shane Massey, who will vote for a judge if she's black and conservative. Now look, I'm sure they had their reasons not to vote for her, and that's fine, but Senator Massey, don't say that it's the law school's fault or the bar's fault that we don't have more minorities on the bench. And even though Ms. Leggett offended Democrats with her voting history and being a conservative, guess what Democrat voted for? Gilda Cobb Hunter, the longest serving member of the House, because she believes that we need more minorities on the bench. And she chose her principles of that one thing. You may disagree with her, I may disagree with her, but that's her principle. We need more blacks on the bench. We need more women on the bench. I'm going to overlook the philosophy, and I'm going to vote for her. Whether we agree with it or not, at least she's got principles. And she chose those principles over House leadership and over making friends. And Scarlett Wilson nailed something else, too. The shenanigans, as she put it, going on right now up at the State House will make your head spin. The reports I get daily from candidates and legislators are mind-blowing. And once these elections are over, I promise y'all, if you want me to come back, I'll tell you everything that's going up there, including the vote swapping and why I think it's taking place in these elections going on right now. And I can't wait. Now, in the interest of time, I was going to talk to you about these two guys, Luke Rankin and Todd Rutherford, but we need to get going because y'all have business tonight. But I'm going to tell you this. These are the guys picking your judges, Todd Rutherford and Luke Rankin. How does that make you feel? They're the people that Harpootlian was talking about in that video. There have been a number of editorials asking for reform of the JMSC. There has been outcry in these editorials and from others to reform the JMSC and remove lawyer legislators from the 10-person JMSC committee. But I'm telling you guys, Merle Smith, Luke Rankin, Todd Rutherford, Micah Caskey, it is bipartisan. They are not budging. And sadly, you can count on one hand how many members of the House actually will stand up to them. People like Representative Joe White from Newberry. You can count almost on only one hand, maybe two, who has the courage to stand up to them. Last October, Solicitor Brackett, myself, and 7 other solicitors sent Merle Smith and Luke Rankin a letter requesting that they remove lawyer legislators from the JMSC. Crickets. We received no response whatsoever, and of course it was denied. Last November, a month later, Kevin and I were asked to go before Merle Smith's ad hoc committee to determine whether our state needs judicial reform. We were asked to give the committee specific examples of preferential treatment that lawyer legislators receive in the courtroom, because many on that committee were saying, literally, that there's no such evidence that lawyer legislators get preferential treatment. None. So Brackett and I went up there, and we gave them an earful of examples. But they also heard from SLED Chief Mark Keel, who told them that the perception problem we have. He told them about the perception problem we have in South Carolina with our judiciary and how the legislature selects them. They heard from sheriffs about the problem. They heard from the state's most prominent criminal defense attorney that lawyer legislators get preferential treatment. And they heard from the former director of the Office of Disciplinary Counsel, the ODC, who corroborated my account of how he once felt, quote, manipulated, that was his word, manipulated by the JMSC to intimidate a judicial candidate. And all it did was it got those lawyer legislators to close ranks. They weren't offended by their colleagues' conduct that we told them about. They were offended that we went up there and called them out. And I'm going to discuss with you just some of the examples of preferential treatment and the evidence of how I believe and why I believe the JMSC is rotten to the core. And as I told the committee, when Kevin and I went before that ad hoc committee, I told them, the one thing that I can prove beyond any doubt is that these instances I'm going to discuss undermine the public's and the bar's confidence in the judiciary. Let's start with the most obvious form of preferential treatment, lawyer legislator protection from the courts. Currently, lawyer legislators get 7 months of absolute protection from the Supreme Court. 7 months. Now think about that. Any other profession, if you're not in session up in Columbia, General Assembly member, you got to go back to work. But if you're a lawyer legislator, from January the 1st until July the 31st, a judge cannot order you to go to court. Except in very rare instances, a judge cannot order you to come to court. And I'm not saying lawyer legislators shouldn't get protection. They absolutely should, especially when they're in session. Absolutely. But this kind of protection is too extreme, in my opinion, and it leads to abuse. Who controls the docket, both civil and criminal in South Carolina? Rhetorical question. It's the courts. Judges are supposed to control the docket. The chief administrative judge for the civil and criminal courts are ultimately in charge of the order cases are called. But in South Carolina, the chief administrative judge for a circuit doesn't control the order of the cases if it involves a lawyer legislator. The lawyer legislator does. Take a look at this. This is a transcript from a case out of Charleston, State versus Larkin. Representative Stavronakis, Democrat. See, I pick on everybody. I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, right? Because again, I think that if we're going to combat corruption, we've got to call them all out, whether they are my friends or not. And a lot of these people used to be my friends, but I can't take it anymore. I don't care about making friends anymore. Sorry. I'm going to call you out, whether you're a friend or not, or were a friend or not, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, Green Party, I don't care. I'm going to call you out. But Representative Stavronakis, he's got 3 cases on the Charleston docket, and he's protected. He's got protection, and the court knows that. And this involves a really good judge out of Charleston named Roger Young. Most of our judges on circuit court are really good, and this is another really good one, Judge Young. And Judge Young tells Representative Stavronakis, we were told the Larkin bond revocation matter isn't going because you're protected. Now, let me explain what a bond revocation is. Those are really important hearings. Those are hearings where the solicitor thinks a defendant who's out on jail needs to be locked back up. They need to go back to jail because they violated their bond. So they're really, really important. You got a defense attorney and a solicitor arguing to get a judge to decide whether somebody should be locked up or not. Very important. Judge Young tells Representative Stavronakis, we were told it isn't going because you're protected. And Stavronakis replies, that is correct. And Judge Young asks him, okay, why are you here? I mean, if you're protected, why are you here? At which time Representative Stavronakis tells him that he's waiving his protection to do a guilty plea he wants to do, but he's not going to let the court go forward on the 2 or 3 bond revocations that the court and the solicitor wants to go to do. I heard your reaction. Who was that? Yeah. Think about that. He's directing the court what cases you can call and which ones you can't. And the judge tells him, well, I haven't seen that in the order, but that's not really in the spirit of things. But guess what? There's nothing the judge could do. They didn't go forward on the bond revocations. They went forward on the plea. And that is wrong. How do you think the optics of that exchange looked? Think about this. For the people in that courtroom that day, for the young prosecutors prosecuting cases, how did it look for the public defenders representing people? How did it look for other criminal defendants? What do you think they're thinking? Why do I have this lawyer when I can hire him and get me out of jail? And how do you think it looked for the victims? I know you're a judge, but you're not locking my client up because I'm a lawyer legislator. That's an outrage, and that's wrong. And did that outrage, did that get those lawyer legislators on that ad hoc, Merle Smith ad hoc committee mad? Nope. They got them mad at us for calling it out. And I could give you hundreds of examples of preferential treatment that lawyer legislators get. But listen, arguably, he's a really good friend of mine, full disclosure. He's one of my really good friends of over 20 years. I actually prosecuted the case where his home was invaded. He is, without a doubt, the most prominent criminal defense attorney in my lifetime, if not in our state's history. I want you to hear what he says about lawyer legislators getting preferential treatment. This is to the ad hoc committee.
Sense that they've got some influence through the judges that other lawyers don't have. How do I know that? How do I know that's happening? It's happening because my clients tell me it's happening. When I sit, and Ms. Benvenuto and I talked about it yesterday, I have clients who come in and say, well, can you do what so-and-so does? Can you get the sentence that so-and-so does? Can you delay my cases for 2 years like so-and-so can? And so I hear that from clients who come to see me. I also hear it from other lawyers who are dealing with the same kind of situation. They hear it from their prospective clients, that there are people who are lawyer legislators who may not be saying it because you have to take that with a grain of salt. People may come in and just say, well, so-and-so said this, so-and-so can do this. I don't accept all of that as true, but if it is true, it's wrong. And we have to clean that up. But ladies and gentlemen, that is the public perception, that certain lawyers have influence in the courts, more than other lawyers do. Prison sentence, that they...
I know what's happening because my clients tell me it takes place, that it's going on. Full disclosure, because he is probably the best defense attorney in the state, David Pascoe is undefeated in trials against Jack Swirling. I just want to let y'all know that, okay? I mean, no applause, anything for that? Come on, man. No, joke. And I actually just said that because Jack is probably watching tonight. It is past his bedtime, so he'll watch it in the morning. But I mean, even Jack Swirling, his clients tell him, asking him, can you keep me out of jail like that person? Can you get me a bond like that lawyer legislator can? And Kevin's going to tell you, I think you're going to tell him that story, another story later about a Swirling case, the bond? Okay, you got more stories coming. This is the last thing I'm going to talk to you all about, and then Solicitor Brackett's going to get up here. It involves Judge Christy Harrington. She was known to be a no-nonsense, hard-nosed judge. She worked long hours, and she was a tough sentencer. When she was up for re-election back in 2017, she was being rescreened before the JMSC in the fall of 2017. She was found well qualified by the Citizens Committee. She was unopposed. Nobody was even running against her. No one filed an official complaint against her. And she was repeatedly told by her JMSC lawyer, which is someone who works for the JMSC, works for the House and Senate, but they're assigned to each candidate. She was repeatedly told, you're going to be fine. You're well qualified, no formal complaints. You've done this, or you've already been elected or reelected on 2 other occasions. You're fine. Honestly, the only bad thing that I can say about Christy is that before she became a judge, she was president of the Berkeley Republican Women. She was vice president of the state Republican Women, and she was a delegate to the Republican National Convention. I mean, you guys would agree with me that's bad, right? Right? Because these guys agreed with me that it was bad. Freaking rhinos want to call me out for coming here and talking to y'all. Really? They thought she was bad because they were the chairman and the vice chairman of the JMSC. I'm going to tell you what happened to her. I mean, seriously, I don't think there are 2 parties sometimes up in Columbia. It's just like the Gipper's quote. It's all about self-interest. Let's get back to Judge Harrington. In August of 2017, she's unopposed with no formal complaint. She's told it's going to be smooth sailing. She's been elected and reelected on a couple of other occasions. November comes along, a few months later, when she has to go before the JMSC and she's forced to withdraw from the race. She has to, as Scarlett Wilson said, drop out. The reported story is that she goes before the JMSC and gets grilled. She's forced to withdraw after being grilled about her demeanor on the bench, her student loans. At one point, they threatened prosecution until she finally stepped down from the race. They literally read her criminal rights, her Miranda warnings. Go read their articles. The state newspaper, Fitz News, the Post and Courier, they all covered it. It was brutal. But let's talk about what wasn't reported. The story that the legislators don't want you to hear about, such as how the JMSC had the director of the Office of Disciplinary Counsel come to her JMSC hearings, and in his words, he felt manipulated, because he didn't know what was going on really. They had him sit on the front row to intimidate her. And let's talk about the other things that the lawyer legislators don't want you to know about. Because this is why she thinks she was forced to withdraw from the race. All right. This is Peter McCoy. Again, somebody I had a great relationship with a couple of years ago. And he's actually a pretty good guy. I'm not saying he's corrupt at all. But he's the former chairman of the judiciary, and he was a member of the JMSC. Ironic enough, when Christy Harrington was coming up, he removed himself from the JMSC, but to think that he's not good friends with all the JMSC members and talks with them would be beyond common sense. But does anybody want to guess why he took himself off the JMSC in 2017? I'll help you out. Guess whose wife was running for judge? Yeah, okay. So, as I told you, lawyer legislators aren't protected in August, so judges can make them come to court. And good judges, that's when they start scheduling lawyer legislators' trials, in August, right? Peter McCoy was first up for a murder trial on a Monday in August of 2017. The Friday before this trial was supposed to start, on the eve of the trial, McCoy asked Harrington to continue the trial. He didn't have grounds for a continuance, in her opinion. He didn't have legislative protection. And the prosecutor objected to a continuance because there were out-of-town witnesses already subpoenaed to be there on Monday. So she denied the continuance. And she knew Peter McCoy was unhappy when he hung up the phone. And what I'm about to tell you by itself proves why we have to have reform. That afternoon, after getting off the phone with McCoy, later that afternoon, she knew she had made a mistake not giving him a continuance. And she called another circuit court judge and told that circuit court judge, quote, "I think I'm in trouble. Peter's mad at me." That story alone is why we have to abolish the current JMSC and the way we select our judges. Ladies and gentlemen, a judge should never have that concern. Never. How is that an independent judiciary when you're worried that you may have offended a legislator and you're going to be forced to withdraw from a race in a few months? How is that an independent judiciary? It's not. And that story, if it ends there, if that's the only thing that happened, even if she got reelected, if it ends there with just a judge so scared that she calls another judge and says, "I'm in trouble because I upset a legislator," that right there screams and demands reform. But there's more. Harrington contacts that JMSC lawyer again, and she tells her again, "You're fine. There are going to be no issues. You're unopposed. You're well qualified." But that following Tuesday evening, she gets a phone call from a Democratic legislator, and that legislator asks her, "What did you do to upset Peter so much? I was with him and Merle Smith last night, and I've never seen Peter so mad." 4 months later, when she goes before the Merle Smiths of the world and the JMSC, she's berated, threatened, and they let her, literally, as I told you, read her rights, and she was forced to withdraw her candidacy. We have got to change the way we pick our judges in South Carolina. We've got to take lawyer legislators off the JMSC. And anyone want to care to guess whose wife breezed through JMSC and got elected the first time she ran for judge? Peter McCoy's wife. And does anybody want to guess whose best friend was later elected a year later when that seat, when Christy Harrington's seat came open? Someone ran for that seat. Anyone want to guess whose best friend got elected to that seat? Say it. That's right. He spoke, McCoy spoke at Judge Bentley Price's investiture. That's right. It was Judge Bentley Price, the one that Harpootlian mentioned earlier, the one that Halverson ran against. You think the JMSC liked Halverson when he ran against an incumbent judge that they put on the bench? You can't make this stuff up. And I can't wait for Kevin to tell you another story that's very similar to this one. The consequences of the system, we have circuit court judges always looking over their shoulders to make sure they're not offending lawyer legislators. That is not an independent judiciary. There has to be a better way of picking judges. We have a remarkably high number of judges in our state related to legislators, whether it's their spouses, their siblings, their children, their best friends, their law partners. There has to be a better way. My friend Solicitor Brackett is going to tell you about the better way. We have a number of bills that are pending. The first two people, you want to talk about courage? The first two people in the General Assembly to file bills were freshman representatives. A freaking Republican named Joe White. Y'all know Joe? Yeah, well, y'all need to support him because that dude's got more courage than the rest of those legislators put together. Okay? And you know, someone he disagrees with 99% of the time, but he admires her because of her principle is Heather Bauer. She's the Democrat freshman. And I wish I had more time. I'd get y'all to love her for one thing. She got rid of let's just say a Republican that's really close with the Todd Rutherfords and the Merle Smiths of the world, okay? But anyway, freshman representatives are the ones that are following the bill. Finally, I mean this, I want to thank you again for inviting me here today. I know it wasn't without a little bit of heartburn, but I really appreciate it. I always have a great time when we're here. Please push your legislative delegation to do the right thing in these races, whether it's a specific judicial race or just passing reform. They'll pass it if you make them pass it. It is an election year. They want to appease you, trust me. And finally, if we could, we'll just take some, we're going to end with a Democrat. Well, actually, Thomas Jefferson was a Republican-Democrat party. We'll end with, red and blue. And let's take some advice from Thomas Jefferson. Let's meet our duty and just convince the world that we're friends and brave enemies. Thank y'all. I'll stick around and answer any questions if you have any tonight, okay? Thank you.
Hello, Greenville. It's so good to be with you tonight. My name's Kevin Brackett. I am the solicitor from the 16th Judicial Circuit, York and Union counties. I was in Union this morning and this afternoon on a little business, and then I drove up here to be with y'all. I'm very excited to be here with you tonight, and I cannot wait to hear what I have to say. And I want to thank you, sir, because I couldn't find the flag when we stood up to do the Pledge of Allegiance, so I was like, well, I'll just face him if I can't find the flag. So I appreciate all my friends' comments, and let me tell you, this is a great American. Regardless of party, he's a man who believes what he believes. He's a man of principle, and he really does stand up at personal cost to himself, because a number of the people he's talking about are friends and people in the same party as him. So, I mean, it takes guts to stand up and say what you know they don't want to hear and what they're not going to appreciate hearing. So I appreciate you being with me here today, brother. That's where my appreciation ends, though, because as usual, my friend Mr. Pascoe has left me with like 5 minutes to do my 40 minutes. I'm like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football every time, like, oh, sure, Lucy's going to hold it, and she's not. I'm flying through the air. It's like, no, I've got it down to 35 minutes, Kevin, I swear. It's like 45, 50, whatever. So I'm going to go through some of my stuff pretty quickly. There's a few things I definitely want to get to. So go ahead, Baker, hit the next one. I want to talk a little bit about like the practical day-to-day. How does it affect a prosecutor to be on the other side of the courtroom against an attorney who selected the judge who's presiding over the case? And he mentioned Joe White. Joe White gave the best example and metaphor for what we face. Imagine you are a Gamecock, and I know there's Clemson people up here, we're in the upstate, but just imagine you're a Gamecock fan, and the Gamecocks are playing Clemson next week, and you find out that Clemson has hired the referees for the game. They're all picked by the Clemson coaching staff, and that's who's going to be reffing the game. How confident would you be in the outcome of that game? You know, when the flags start flying against the Gamecocks, you're going to wonder, am I getting a fair deal here? Is my team getting a fair deal? And I want to make clear one thing at the beginning. Neither David nor I, neither of us are calling out the judges, okay? The legislature constantly wants to make it sound like we hate the judges and we think the judges are doing a lousy job. That's what they want you to think. That's the subject. That's what they want this conversation to be about. It is not about that. We've got some great judges. The problem is the position that the system puts those judges in when the men and women who hire them step up into the courtroom to practice law in front of them. They are put in a very awkward position. And it baffles me how anybody could go, yeah, that's fair. He hired him, but we can expect him to be fair. And he has the power not only to hire him, but every 6 years, he can fire him. They don't forget that. They can't help but remember that. They could try their best, and then when they see what happens to people like Christy Harrington, that David just talked about, that's like a warning shot across the bow of every judge in the state. Don't cross these people. It will come back on you when you come up for reselection. They can't help but notice that. And if you're the victim in the case, and the defendant who victimized you or someone you love is over there with a lawyer legislator, and you just see how unfair it is, and you feel like you're getting mistreated. I'm in a church, so I have to remember. You feel like you're not being treated fairly. It's a bitter, bitter experience for those people. It is, because this is their chance at justice, and they're being cheated when they feel, whether it's true or not, when they feel like the refs were hired by the other team. Because guess what? In court, the refs were hired by the other team when you're dealing with a lawyer legislator. So I want to talk about a few cases, and I'm going to go through them real quick. Go back just a second. Thank you. State versus David Morgan. This is a guy whose criminal record dates back, I think, to the late 80s. Okay? He got arrested in about 2015 or so, mid-2010s, and charged with shooting up a parking lot at a nightclub in Rock Hill. Okay? I mean, bullets are flying, people are diving everywhere. No question he did it. He pleads guilty. Todd Rutherford, you'll hear a lot about him. Todd Rutherford represents him. This is a guy who has done 10 and 15-year stretches for prior crimes. Usually, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I think that the more you do, the worse it should get for you as time goes by. It shouldn't get better for you. But this guy got like 4 years, 3 years, nothing. A slap on the wrist for what he did, shooting up a parking lot with all these people running. You guys have a senator up here named Carl Allen. Does anybody know Mr. Allen? Yeah. Carl, he just comes to court whenever he feels like it, and nobody does anything about it. I got to the point with Carl, he had cases in Union. I got to the point with him where I would just say, Carl, the month of October is wide open. You pick the day and the time and come handle this case. You pick it. I don't care. I'll be there. We'll take care of it. So he does, and I show up for court that day. His client is there. Everybody's there ready to do the case. No, Carl, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. I'm talking to his client. Have you heard from your lawyer? Where is he? Have you heard from him? No. Can you call his office and find out where he's at? I'm trying to call. Finally, the judge sends his law clerk to call. So we're all calling. Finally, at about 2 o'clock, I'm sitting in the courtroom, and I see the judge's law clerk stand up, hold his phone up, and he points to it. And he's like, it's Carl. Can you believe it? So he slips out, and I sneak out behind him, and I'm like listening. And he's like, yes, sir, Mr. Allen, the judge just wanted to know if you were going to be here, because your client's here, and everybody's sitting here waiting are you on your way? And I could hear over the speakerphone, I can't believe you're bothering me. How dare you call me? I've got things going on, and I'm doing the best I can. You tell him I said blah, blah, blah. Do I have to call Gene Toll, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at the time and in charge of scheduling all the judges and could make a judge's life difficult? I would never dream of yelling at a judge's law clerk. That's like yelling at the judge. If the judge's law clerk's calling you, it's because the judge told him to do that, not because he did it himself. You just don't do that unless you have a senator before your name, because nothing happened. He didn't show up. Nothing happened to him. Nobody ever said anything. It got so bad I just started getting transcripts from when he wouldn't show up. I'd stand up in court and hold forth on the record. It's another event, Your Honor, where Mr. Allen decided not to join us. Over and over again. He represented the next guy on the list, Jeremy Trevio Saxon, a gang member who in 10 years from the age of about 16 to 25, was implicated in 3 separate homicides. He was in a gang, he's in a gang in the 8th Circuit, down Newberry, Lawrence County, that area, Newberry. Finally, in like 2019, he gets charged with stabbing a guy. The guy would have died if the EMS people had literally not been right outside the door of the place where he got stabbed. They saved his life. Slam dunk case. They got him. Carl gets hired to represent him. Carl walks around talking to judges. Next thing you know, he's pleading guilty in front of a judge and getting probation. Probation for stabbing a guy almost to death. And the postscript, the sad postscript is, his gang killed the same guy, found him and killed the guy, finished the job about a year later. So, yeah, nobody gets probation for that. I mean, I know you're not in court all the time, but it shocks the conscience. You don't stab a guy and nearly kill him and then walk out of court with a slap on the wrist. Kieran Marcellus Danis is another case. I won't even go into that because I'm running out of time. 30-kilo fentanyl ring at the bottom there. It was the fall of 22. We arrested a ring of people who were selling fentanyl. Everybody knows what fentanyl is? It's killing people. 5 a day in South Carolina are dying. 5 a day. Every day that goes by, 5 people are dead in South Carolina from overdosing on fentanyl. It's terrible. We get these guys, 3 of them, the ringleaders, the kingpins. They all know, all the criminals know, if you get in trouble, you need to hire a lawyer legislator. All 3 of the ringleaders hired legislator lawyers. Every single one. They had Seth Rose, Dick Harpootlian, and Todd Rutherford were hired. Now, the joke was on them because we moved the case to federal court where a federal judge presided over it and doesn't give a rip that they're the legislators. They don't care. Federal judges are like, whatever, I don't care about you need to be in court at 10 o'clock. And if you're not in federal court at 10 o'clock, the U.S. Marshals come look for you. So it's a different thing over there. But yeah, so even the criminals know. That's who you go to. And you heard about the protection. You know, they absolutely cannot be brought to court. We can't get them there. But I bet you can bet if they get hired and their guy's in jail, it doesn't matter if they're in session or not. They'll find their way to the courthouse for a bond hearing to get their client out of jail. They just don't show up when it comes time to do a guilty plea or a trial. You can't get them there for that. But to get their guy out, they'll be there. Go ahead, Baker. This is the last case I want to talk to you about, State versus Hawthorne. Lieutenant Larry Vaughn, a wonderful man, great decorated police officer from the Rock Hill Police Department, retired after 30 years in law enforcement. Within the first year, he was found beaten to death in his apartment. And Mr. Hawthorne has been charged in that. It's still a pending case. I'm not going to go into the facts and details of the case. That's not relevant for what I want to talk about. What is relevant is that he hired Jack Swerling. His family hired Jack Swerling, like David said, the dean of the criminal defense bar, the Muhammad Ali of criminal defense lawyers in South Carolina. He hires Jack to come represent him. Jack comes for not 1, but 2 separate bond hearings. He's in court 2 different times, about 6 or 7 months apart, trying to get a bond from Mr. Hawthorne. Both times he's shot down. A few months after the last failed one, we hear that Todd Rutherford has been hired and that he wants a bond hearing. And that he wants it to be not just that he wants a bond hearing, he wants it on a specific day, like a month and a half out. He wants it on Tuesday, December 13th in the morning. He's like specific. This is when I want my bond hearing. So we go back and forth. He doesn't even tell Jack that he's in on the case, which is, odd to us. And so he says, yeah, just go ahead and schedule. So we write back and say, well, Jack represents this guy. Where's Jack on this? And he writes back, no, my client doesn't want Jack there. He doesn't care. He doesn't care if Muhammad Ali, the guy he's hired to fight for him, is there or not. I'll be there, and that's all that matters. So we call Jack. What do you think? He says, well, if my client writes that down and sends it to me and says he doesn't care if I'm there because I can't be there on December 13th, I'm in a murder trial in Lancaster County. If he writes it down, fine, go ahead and do it. He can do what he wants. His client writes it down. I go to the judge and say, well, this is like 10 days before the 13th. I go to the judge and I say, let me check with the victims to make sure that they can be there. And it turns out that Larry's daughter is in college, and it's right in the middle of final exams. And her mother says, please don't make her come. This is going to be very upsetting for her. As you can understand, her father was killed. So this is a really bad time to do this. She's in the middle of exams. So the chief judge says, okay, well, I'm not going to make him do it. So we tell the family, you can stand down. There'll be no hearing on that day. The chief judge has said no. 3 days, Friday before the bond hearing is supposed to happen on Tuesday, we get a message. The visiting judge from out of town has said he'll hear it. And we're like, whoa, wait a minute. I'd go to the chief judge. You said we wouldn't have to hear this. I already told the family we don't have to hear this. It's going to be very upsetting for him, please. He said, well, I don't want to step on the toes of the visiting judge if he said he'd hear it. And I'm thinking, do you not want to step on his toes, or do you not want to step on Todd Rutherford's toes, the guy who sits on the commission that reviews whether you get to continue to be a judge? But that's neither here nor there. The bond hearing was held on Tuesday, the 13th. And guess what? Where the dean of the criminal, where Muhammad Ali failed twice, he got a bond, and he got out of jail later that day. Out the door he went. And then we find that there's these tapes, jail calls from the detention center, where the mother of the defendant is talking to the defendant in jail. And this is like 6 months before the bond hearing. And she says, I just talked to Todd. He says that we just need to wait for the right judge. We got to wait for the right judge. And then a few months later, another conversation. Well, I know that you're impatient and you want to have the hearing, but you know, these things take time. We should just be grateful that Todd has influence, which the family hears about that. And what are they supposed to think? You're not supposed to have influence over a judge. A judge is supposed to make a decision based on what's right and what's wrong, based on the facts, based on the law, based on the evidence, not based on who's standing in front of him and whether that guy has the power to take his job or not, whether that guy has done him favors by giving him the job in the past, whether there's some relationship between them. So that's the incident. And this kind of thing happens all the time with legislator lawyers. You walk out of court with that queasy feeling, like, you know, like dirty, like you want to take a shower. Was this right? Was this done properly? Did we get treated fairly? Did these victims get treated fairly? Go ahead, Baker. So you heard about Christy Harrington on the left. What I want to talk about next is the gentleman on the right. His name is Tommy Russo. Tommy Russo was a great judge out of Florence. You notice I said was, because he is no longer on the bench either. Now, Tommy Russo was up for re-election in 2020, I think it was. And he was, again, no opposition. His lawyer at JMSC said, no complaints, everything looks good, you're on cruise control for a smooth landing, you should have no problems with your re-election. What he didn't know was that he had a case that he was going to try in Colleton County, go ahead, Baker, that's Larios versus Dominion Energy, formerly known as South Carolina Electric and Gas. The facts of the case are pretty simple. Larios was like a landscaper guy, like, you know, migrant worker kind of dude who just, you know, did landscaping, cleaned things up. He was working on some land in Colleton County, and on land that had some equipment on it that apparently South Carolina Electric and Gas put some stuff in there, and they did something negligent, I assume, and Mr. Larios was electrocuted and died. Tragedy. So the estate of Mr. Larios, and he had no wife, no children, he had a couple of parents back in Mexico that he occasionally sent money to, they sued on behalf of Mr. Larios, suing SCEG for negligence in Colleton County. And the jury came back and returned a verdict in September of $21 million in damages for Mr. Larios' death. Now, don't tell anybody I said this, but if I died as the result of somebody's negligence, with family, children, bright career, whatever, I don't know that I would be worth $21 million. That's a lot of money. for somebody. And $21 million. You factor in their earning potential. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. Mr. Larios, his life had value, but $21 million, that's a lot of money. So South Carolina Electric and Gas said, wait a minute, this jury must have got something wrong. Something didn't go right here. We would like a new trial. So they file a motion for a new trial. And the plaintiff who got the $21 million verdict that they now want to protect says, well, we'll be there to argue this, but we're not going to argue it. We're hiring somebody else. And in steps, go ahead and hit it, Merle Smith, who was the chairman of the JMSC at the time, now the Speaker of the House. Merle Smith gets hired. Hasn't been involved in this case at all up till now. But Merle gets hired to go in and defend the $21 million verdict for the Larios estate. South Carolina Electric and Gas goes. They have their motion. They have the hearing. They file it on the 8th. On the 18th, Merle Smith makes an appearance. On the 25th, the motion is argued. And then Friday of the following week, Judge Russo, who presided over the trial, files an order granting the new trial. In other words, he denied Merle Smith. He told Merle, no, you don't get to keep the $21 million verdict. That's too much money. We're going to have a do-over. Hit it? 17 days later, on November the 18th, Judge Russo shows up for screening day, his screening in front of the JMSC. Merle's not there for some reason. He's recused himself from the case. Like he knows that the connection between the Larios case is too much, so he steps out as if he knows what's about to happen. They go into executive session and they start questioning him about some Facebook posts. And I've seen the Facebook post, and I talked to Tommy Russo about this, and it was basically something like, the media is jumping all over Trump because he's talking about immigration. And he said this and this and this about immigration, Trump did. But if you go back to 1998, look at this article, Clinton said the exact same thing, this and this and this. Why didn't they jump all over Clinton 20 years ago? Now they're jumping all over Trump. It's a double standard. That's all he was saying. It wasn't like really a political thing. He was just commenting on how the media treats people. So that's what they hold up and say, judges aren't supposed to have conversations about politics. Now, bear in mind that somebody had complained to the Supreme Court about this post, and the Supreme Court had looked into it and said, nah, there's nothing there. We're not going to do anything about this. But they raise it, and they say, based on this, we want to see all of your Facebook posts. We're going to come back on Wednesday, and after we've looked at your whole, give us the password. We want to go back through and look at all of your, go through, let us see everything. He says, absolutely, I have nothing to hide. They go through, they find a couple more things on Wednesday. They go back into executive session, but this time the mood is different. The temperature in the room has dropped 15 degrees, 20 degrees. It's cold in there for Tommy Russo. They start beating him up, berating him, yelling at him, calling him out, saying, humiliating him. Judges aren't used to being treated like this, but they don't care. They are just beating the heck out of this poor guy. And he was blindsided. He had no expectation that this was about to happen, did not know. And then after about an hour of berating him, Todd Rutherford looks down at it and says, they haven't voted, nothing. They haven't even taken a break to go vote. Todd Rutherford looks down and says, you will not be screened out. Now you have two choices. You can withdraw, or we're going to go back out in public on the record and do all this over again and humiliate you in front of everybody. And Russo's like, literally just shell-shocked. And he says, I need some time to think about this. I'd like to talk to my wife. This is my career. And they said, and he was thinking, can I get back to you tomorrow? And they said, you got 5 minutes. So he runs out in the hallway on his cell phone, talking to his wife in just a few minutes, trying to make the best decision he can. And he goes back in there and says, okay, I'll withdraw. I don't want to go through that. I don't want to go through that. And he gets in his car and he drives back to Florence. And about 25 minutes down the road, he's like, wait a minute, that isn't right. So he calls back. I want to withdraw my withdrawal. I want to go ahead and go through with it. Too late. Sorry. No good. And that was the end of Tommy Russo's candidacy. Now, I don't know that Merle Smith's participation in the Larios case had anything to do with that, but he didn't seem to have any problems before that. And then everything went to hell in a handbasket after that. So you have to, what's your perception of that? Do you think that that might have had something to do with it? Really? Of course. That's what anybody would think. But it gets worse than that. Go ahead. Because when he withdrew, that left his position vacant. So on June 30th of the following year, his post was vacant and they started taking applications to replace him. Okay? So they go through and like 14 different people apply to replace Tommy Russo. This is a great article John Monk wrote for the state newspaper. Go ahead and hit the next one. I'm going to give you some quotes from it. This is the lead paragraph, which I just love. It's beautiful. Ancestors, family pedigrees, old friendships, college ties, easy cheer, and even merit were all part of the mix last week in a ritual where candidates for South Carolina's open judgeships parade before a judicial screening commission to see if they have the right stuff to make it on the bench. Go ahead. This is a rare moment of candor from Todd Rutherford. The fact that most of the 14 candidates had ties to the judiciary or public officials was a given. And this is Todd's quote. If you find a lawyer coming in here that doesn't have connections, I promise you they won't make it out, said Rutherford, himself a prominent defense attorney. We have a very small legal community. If somebody came in here and didn't have a connection to anybody in this room, I don't know how they'd make it out. So it doesn't matter what you know or what quality you are. All that matters is, are you connected to one of the people that sits on that commission? Do you have the right stuff, i.e. a connection, a family connection, a college connection, to get through the screening process? Go ahead, Baker. One of the people that ran for Tommy Russo's seat was H. Stephen DeBerry IV. I don't know this gentleman. I have no idea if he's a good person, bad person, a good judge or not. Have no idea. He is a Florence lawyer and a member of the Florence County Council. DeBerry is first cousin to Representative Merle Smith. First cousin, the powerful House member and screening commission member. Merle says, well, I don't want to be involved because I know that Mr. DeBerry wants to go through and do this on his own. He doesn't want me putting my thumb on the scale for him. Go ahead, next. Guess who won to replace Tommy Russo? The guy who had the courage to stand up and speak his mind and make the decision that he thought was fair and to tell Merle Smith no. Not only did he get stripped of his robe, but he was replaced by Merle Smith's first cousin. You really can't make this stuff up, people. It is unbelievable. And what message, again, I ask you, does that send to all the other judges who are out there? What are they thinking when they see this happen to Judge Russo? They're thinking, I don't want that to be me. Okay, I may not feel good about this decision, but I'm going to hold my nose and make it and rule for the lawyer legislator because I don't want to end up like him. I want to stay on the bench so I can do the good that I can do, but they are definitely stupid if they're not paying attention to Judge Russo's situation and Judge Harrington's. Go ahead, Baker. Now, that's not the only thing. This is a little video clip that I want to set up for you real quick. About 14 years ago, South Carolina did this big comprehensive sentencing reform. Basically, the legislature got up and said to themselves, we spend so much money on prisons, let's reduce the population of the Department of Corrections so we can, save money there. So they set out to water our criminal laws down and make it harder to send people, and they sent the message out because they select the judges. We all noticed. People who would have gone to prison 10 years before were not going to prison anymore. I mean, the message went through. So this commission went on and continued to hold hearings after they passed the laws that watered things down, and they studied how many people are in prison now. Before it was 25,000. Now we're down to 22. Now we're down to 20, 18. We've been as low as 15,000. 10,000 fewer people in prison. Well, this The whole thing was driven by a nonprofit think tank called the Pew Foundation. You ever heard of the Pew Foundation? The Pew Foundation was founded by the Pew family, which had Sun Oil Company, also known as Sunoco, very, very wealthy people. And as they got older, they wanted their money to go together. They were super conservative folks. Back in the 40s, 50s, they set up this big trust fund to do good things, conservative things. They were free market people all the way, and that was where it went. But somewhere in the 80s, the Pew Foundation got hijacked and took a hard left turn and never turned back. So now the Pew Foundation is onto stuff like this. Let's stop throwing people in jail. So a lot of our criminal justice problems relate to stuff like this. Well, the Pew Foundation came back to report to the South Carolina legislature about the state of our prisons and who was going. And they said, right now, it appears that the #1 driver for prison incarceration, the #1 thing that's sending people to prison, is probation revocations. You all know what probation is? It's like you're standing in front of the judge, you plead guilty. He can throw you in jail, or he can put you on probation, which is like, we're not going to put you in jail, but we're going to hang some time over your head, and then we're going to watch you. And if you screw up again, then we're going to revoke the probation and send you to jail. So mind your P's and Q's, right? It's a second chance program. Well, this Pew Foundation lady says, probation revocations are causing our jail population to hold steady or even go up a little bit. And that's a concern to us. Like, we need to watch this. So Todd Rutherford is the person you'll hear speaking. She's from the Pew Foundation. Hit it, Baker.
To Mr. Taylor's point, maybe we should start looking at breaking it down per judge. Because some judges just have a burr about probation revocations and believe that being on probation is your chance, as opposed to you took it because you pled pro se and it was the only thing they offered you, and so there you are, standing in front of a judge on a PWID marijuana getting revoked because you didn't report to your NA meeting, but you wouldn't have gone to jail if you'd have just said, I don't want probation at the beginning. So looking at the judges and seeing what judges are sentencing these nonviolent offenders to prison and revoking people's probations, because as Mr. Taylor points out, that is probably sometimes the best indicator of who's going and who's not, is what judge is on the bench.
MSC, he picks the judges. And what does he ask the Pew Foundation to do? Tell me which judges are sending people to prison. That's what I want to know. Who's sending these people to prison? Let me know. What do you think that has an effect on these judges? It's like the guy who hires me wants to know if I'm sending people to jail. Well, if somebody's put on probation, it is a second chance program. And if you don't follow the rules, you should go to jail. And that's what everybody in this room and pretty much anybody walking down the sidewalk right now in South Carolina thinks. So it's ridiculous for him to sit there and go, some judges have a burr. They think it's like a second chance. Heck yeah, it's a second chance. Your other options, go to prison. But that's the kind of thing they're looking at. And they can have that effect on judges because they're watching them. Are you sending people to jail? I'm watching you. You're sending an awful lot of people to jail, Judge. You're coming up in a year and a half. We'll talk about that then. So, chilling effect on you? Of course it is. Go ahead. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm going to try to speed up. We made some recommendations to the committee that David told you about. There's a Judicial Reform ad hoc committee that was put together. David and I went up there. They invited us. They asked us, come up and tell us what problems there are. We're hearing about all these problems, but nobody ever tells us what they are. So we went up there and we told them, this is half of what we said. It's online. You can go see it. I mean, we went on, and we left a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. There was stuff we didn't talk about because it's like, okay, this is overkill. I think they're going to get the message. We went on and on about it. And I'll talk about Micah Caskey's little screed. He wrote a response just recently, and it's kind of funny, but I'll talk about that in a minute. But we went up there to tell them because they asked us. And they also asked us, what recommendations do you have? Well, as bad as General Sessions Court, the circuit judges we're talking about, probation and that sort of thing, as bad as that is, as bad or worse is magistrate court, because those judges, the magistrate judges, and that's pretty much traffic court, that's small court, 30 days or less, those judges are picked by the senators. So if you're a senator who practices criminal defense, you literally hire your judge. That judge owes his job to you personally. And every 4 years, I get to decide whether you keep it. So how do you think I'm going to get treated when I walk into your courtroom? So we recommended that they really should raise that up to 3 years, make district judges out of them, and make them all lawyers. If you're going to throw somebody in jail for 3 years, you better know the law, because that's a long time. We should say the number of judges in a county should be dictated by population, and district judges should be selected by the senior circuit judge who supervises them. If they're not doing a good job, that judge should fire them, not a legislator. They should answer to a higher judge, in other words. Next. For the JMSC, the heart and soul of the issue, ladies and gentlemen, is dividing the responsibility for judicial selection between the executive branch, the governor, and the legislature. Right now, the legislature has all the power. They completely dominate the judiciary. And all we're saying is split it 50-50. Give the governor half of the power and you take half. Let the governor select the judge and you approve it, or let the governor screen all the candidates and send you the qualified ones and you pick that one, so that not one branch of government is dominating the other one. We think that there should be term limits for the JMSC. You shouldn't sit there in perpetuity like some people do. All the hearings should be open and televised, not happening in secret like Judge Russo's was. We think the JMSC should include retired judges. Who better to screen a judge than somebody who did it for 20 or 25 years, somebody who knows the job? Consider a pool of members who are drawn randomly from the bar, so that you don't even know who's going to screen you. It can just be like, we're going to pick 3 senior lawyers who've been practicing for 20 or 25 years in that court where you want to be a judge, and they know what they expect from a good judge. Let them be the screener. But then once you've screened them, then you're done. The judge never has to worry about appearing in front of those people again. So they don't have to worry, can this guy fire me? They're never going to see him. And extend the term of a circuit judge to 8 years, so they're never screened by the same governor's panel, because a governor, unlike our legislators, is term limited. 8 years is the most you can be governor, unless you're Henry McMaster. You get to be governor for 10 years, which is a good thing. I got no problem. But other than, if you did it to every 8 years, then the same governor is never going to have a say-so over whether you get to be a judge again. Baker? The problem isn't selection as much as reselection. Every judge lives in fear of not getting reappointed. So when they're working and they're on the bench, they constantly think, is this person going to come back and bite me? Is this person going to come back and hold something I do in court today against me later on when I'm back up in front of them for reselection? The governor appoints and the legislature confirms, and the public votes. That's called the Missouri Plan. In a lot of states, half the states just about use the Missouri Plan. Governor picks, legislature confirms, and then every 6 or 8 years, you, the people, get to vote. Not a contested election, not Democrat, Republican, nonpartisan, and all you're doing is thumbs up, the judge is doing a good job, or thumbs down, we need a new judge. And then it goes back to the governor and the legislature, and you have a new judge. So that judge doesn't have to raise money. There's no, it's not a contested election like North Carolina, which we don't agree with. We think that reselection by the legislature is the persistent threat to judicial independence, and that's what this whole conversation is about. Our judges need to be independent. They do not need to make decisions living in fear that somebody's going to hold that against them. They should only answer to their conscience when they make a decision. That's the heart of the matter. Baker? Hamilton Federalist 78. Back when they were selling the Constitution to the public, back at, the 1780s, 1788, 89, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and John Jay wrote a series of papers called the Federalist Papers, basically describing each section of the Constitution and why it was crafted. It's the best resource there is to peer into the minds of the Founding Fathers. What were they thinking when they put the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment? What were they thinking when they divided the 3 branches of government up? And what they were thinking in Hamilton Federalist 78 about judicial independence was, this is Alexander Hamilton's paper, he wrote 78, "For I agree, there is no liberty if the powers of judging be not separated from the legislative and executive powers." In other words, the judges need to be independent of the legislature, independent of the governor, independent of the president. And it proves in the last place that as liberty can have nothing to fear from the judiciary alone, which is, the judiciary is the weakest branch of government. They have no power, they have no army, they can't tax, they can't spend money. All they do is decide what's right. What does the Constitution mean? What do these laws mean? What sentence should I impose? They have no real power. But liberty can have nothing to fear from the judiciary alone, but would have everything to fear from its union with either of the other departments. If one of the other branches of government can capture and dominate the judiciary, that is fertile grounds for tyranny. That is how we lose our freedom, because we depend on the judiciary to protect our freedoms. Next slide. And the other thing, I'll just touch on this briefly, the other way you can influence the judiciary is through the purse. You can affect their budget. If I can say, well, I can't fire you, but I can reduce your salary to $1, well, I'm just about firing you if you want to eat. I mean, unless you're independently wealthy, you're going to, you're going to need money to live on. So I think that we would also do well to protect the South Carolina judiciary from this kind of influence by mandating that they receive a percentage of the overall budget. Or in times of lean, when cuts have to be made, their cuts should not be more than any other agency, so that they can't be influenced by threatening their budget, because that's another way they could get at them. Baker? Next, go ahead. So the committee has just come out with some recommendations. I added this. This is some new stuff that I didn't talk about in Lexington. And these suggestions aren't bad. There's some good stuff in there. I'm not criticizing what they've done. They've agreed that term limits should be set for the members and the chair on the JMSC. They want to lift the cap on the candidates. If you're found qualified, your name should go out. Right now, only 3. So they're able to really influence who gets elected. They can get Tweedledee, Tweedledum, and the guy they want and send them out. And if we just said no, you have to, if you find them qualified, all the candidates have to go out. That's a good thing. Stream the hearings to increase transparency so the public can have confidence that the hearings are being done fairly. End holdover status for magistrates, which I won't go into because we're running out of time. Increase magistrate jurisdiction. They agree with that. That's a good thing. And screen the magistrates. They're currently not screened. So I think these are all good suggestions, but they've missed the biggest thing we asked for. The whole point of us showing up there was divide the power between the executive and the legislature. Give the governor 50% of the responsibility of selecting the judges, and they didn't do that. And that's a disappointment. And it really sort of takes the sweetness out of any of these other suggestions out, because that's really what needs to happen in order to protect the independence of the judiciary. So the one guy that is on the committee, who is also the chairman of the JMSC currently, is Micah Caskey from Lexington. We were in Lexington last time, and we talked about Micah a little bit. But since then, he has, after they came out with their recommendations, Mr. Caskey published his own 15-page document talking about what he thinks. And believe me, it is lengthy. Yeah, a lot in there, right? Let me just tell you, so that I can sort of sum this up for you and save you a lot of heartache and trouble. If you ever get a document and set out to read it, and within the first few paragraphs you find the words loquaciousness, verbosity, and explication in close proximity to each other in the first couple of paragraphs, gently set the document down and run away, because it will be tough sledding. I did it because I knew I was going to come here and talk to you, and I felt it was my duty to give you, I did it. I waded through all 15 pages, and I will not deny that it took some strong, spirited beverages to fortify me, along with periodically dunking my head into a bath of ice water to just keep me going. The only thing I can really say, I guess, when I finally got to the end of it, I got to his conclusion, and then I got to my conclusion. And I guess his conclusion is that he's the smartest guy he knows. My conclusion is that this document is 50 cents worth of information wrapped up in about $1 million worth of words. Because there ain't much in there, people. It's a lot of specious arguing and back and forth, and he talks about why Hamilton's 78th Federalist paper is inapplicable because federal judges are appointed for life, and that's really not the point we use 78 for. It's just a lot of, here, let me tell you what I think in $100 words. But he inspired me. He did, and I want to share a couple. I thought, I'm not opposed to people improving their vocabulary. I think it's a good thing if people improve their, you ought to be able to speak with precision and communicate your thoughts with absolute precision. That's a good thing. So in the spirit of that, I said, I'm going to do a word of the day based on this. And then I struggled. I came down to 2 words of the day, and I couldn't decide which one, so I'm going to give them both to you. Inspired by Mr. Caskey. The first word is bombast. Bombast means a forceful and confident style that is intended to be very powerful and impressive, but may not have much real meaning or effect. So that's your first word of the day. And my second word of the day is bloviate. Bloviate means to speak a lot in an annoying way, as if you're very important. So there you go. Inspired by Mr. Caskey, your words of the day. I hope you enjoy them, use them. Next slide, I think, should be questions. So I didn't leave us much time. It's 8:45. You guys got to be out of here at 9:30.
All right, I do have a relevant question here because I heard something that sounded very familiar. So in Anderson County, I own a home that I raised my children in. We do not live in it. We were remodeling it. We had a lot of tools in there. And we got a phone call one night, and as it turned out, a young man had cut through the wooden panel on the bottom of the door. And for no more than 2 weeks, because I was there 2 weeks prior to that, had been taking our tools and making them go away wherever they actually went. It was $4,000 worth of stuff. They put him in jail. He stayed there for, 5 weeks. He didn't figure out how to get bond and get out. He finally did. They took him to a preliminary hearing, and they said there was no cause. Now, since then, I've talked to officers. They've got him talking to his sister while he's in jail. Yeah, I've been in that house before. And yeah, you can go take a shower if you want. All the electricity and the water and stuff are on. And I'm out $4,000. They did nothing to him. So they first got him on burglary. Second, they tried to go after, I guess, larceny, grand larceny, $4,000 worth of stuff. No cause, nothing. So does that sound right to you? Out of curiosity. This is Anderson County.
Does that sound typical?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the whole point of the criminal justice reform back in 2010. Their stated purpose was, okay, we're going to stop throwing nonviolent people in prison so we can make more room for the violent people, which sounds good in theory, but the problem is that the nonviolent people need to be motivated not to commit crimes too. And if you have no fear of going to prison, then getting arrested periodically and having to spend a few weeks in jail just becomes the cost of doing business. And so we get a lot of property crime, and it's one of the categories of crime that really has not seen the level of punishment and accountability that we should have. And I'll tell you, a lot of property crime is motivated by drug use. People say, drugs are victimless crime. Why are we putting people in jail? I understand the libertarian theory behind that. Fine. Here's the problem. They're not a victimless crime because in order to buy drugs, they need money. In order to get money, they're stealing your tools. And by not taking care of these people, we are not motivating them to fix themselves. Some people only have to wake up in a puddle of vomit one time to realize that, maybe taking drugs and drinking a bunch of liquor isn't a good thing. And they fix themselves. Other people need to be compelled to embrace recovery. We don't do that in South Carolina. I used to have 45 people in my drug court fixing their lives. Now I'm down to 15 in the middle of an opioid epidemic because people would rather take probation than go into recovery because recovery is hard. So instead, our system where we think we're being compassionate for these people, we're not. We are literally sticking them back out into the community to continue abusing drugs and die. That's what's happening. We are failing them in the worst possible way. And a lot of them steal to get money to buy drugs. Oh, did I answer your question before you finished asking it? I'm sorry.
What happened?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Did you have a question?
Can I go first? I want to quantify the case with the $21 million. That was, with the gentleman that was killed with Dominion and SCNG. $21 million lawsuit. How much of that would go to the plaintiff firm? 50%?
At least 7, but probably more than that because it went to trial.
Okay, since it went to trial, my understanding is most of them, they go to 50%. So
It could be.
they were going to get $7 million to $10.5 million.
Anywhere from $7 to probably $11 million.
Right. Yeah. So Merle Smith comes in at the last minute to protect that $10 million or $7 to $10 million lawsuit. Would he have gotten a percentage of that, perhaps?
Whatever he would have worked out with those plaintiffs for.
Right.
And that's correct. It could have been a half of what. It just depends on what they negotiated. You're absolutely right. I guarantee this. It was at least 7 figures.
It was easily a million plus.
I wouldn't have done it for less than $1 million.
Right. So I could easily see somebody coming in and being added to the case that you handled the whole case. Give me 10% cut if I can protect that $21 million verdict. That was a 7-figure, $1 million payday for Merle Smith. That's the numbers we're talking about. And what did Merle Smith do when he didn't get his perhaps $1 million, maybe more, maybe less? He sat there and kicked that judge out.
And you got to remember what Jeff and Kevin said. Merle Smith had nothing to do with that case. Nothing to do with it. And I remember I talked to Judge Russo months before we started putting these presentations together. And he said he was literally sitting on the bench and he's ready to do the motion for the new trial. And he saw Merle Smith walk in the courtroom and he said to himself, "You've got to be kidding me. I'm going in front of this guy in less than 4 weeks to keep my job." Think about that.
I mean, and think about that. If I was the plaintiff's attorney and I knew I was going to get a 50% payback, I'm going to try to bring in the ringer. I'm going to try to bring in, Brady or somebody big, Peyton Manning, to come in and win that and protect that. Because, as Solicitor Brackett said, $21 million is, that is over the top for evaluation of, it's an accident, it's a tragedy, a life is worth something, but $21 million is over the top. So.
Okay, one last question? Okay. Oh, you have to, oh my goodness, we're gonna be, okay, on the clock.
Yes, I have a question that's not really related to any of the cases you were talking about here, but you listed, I think I wrote down about 5 names of representatives or senators that are involved in the committee that you were talking about, the JMSC. And to me, it appears, and probably everyone here, that these people are corrupt. And we're talking about this committee changing these rules. Well, if they're so willing to be corrupt, just like you said, this guy's taking, $5 million payout, why the heck would I think they would be honest in anything else? Why aren't we primarying them and getting them out? And that's what my comment is. Because I don't trust them with nothing. You told me this, and I think they're corrupt, period. So what's your answer on that? Are we doing that?
Thank you. She's absolutely right. I think we're done with questions. You said one more?
It's right, one more.
One more?
Too quick.
You got Carl Allen.
You asked about Carl Allen? He's my state senator. I campaigned for a lady against him. Okay, obviously my question is you. You're right. I tried to get him out. He knows it. Jane Kaiser, she got about 30-something% of the vote. My question to you is this. Could I get this type of information from you if we went on the campaign trail?
Absolutely. I mean, we'll give
Okay.
you the records that we have and the cases that he's got.
Fantastic.
I can tell you more about it.
That is what,
We
that's,
do that, but he is in a district that, I mean,
he's my district.
It's a tough district for him to lose. I mean, it was drawn Democrat. He's a Democrat.
Yes, I'm well aware of that. But you must think,
Democrats out there, we got one on stage with us here. I mean, they should be as concerned, and a lot of them are. Gil Cobb Hunter, there are good Democrats out there, Heather Bauer, who are also equally appalled at all of this. And I would call on them, if we don't stand much of a chance in it, as a Republican against him, get a good Democrat. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you, sir.
Okay. You guys have, okay, hurry up. Clock's ticking.
Just one quick question. Oh, one quick question. If we pass a law, you've got proposals for legislation to fix this, right? A lot of proposals, right? What's to keep them from just, 5 years from now, just changing it around? Don't we need to make these constitutional amendments?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the JMSC, which is a statutory fix, but the whole scheme of selecting judges is based in the Constitution, which would require a constitutional change, which is a much heavier lift.
Yeah, a much, much heavier lift and would take many.
Right.
I think we should start trying to get that accomplished. But let's do what we know we can do now, which is pass a statute.
Well, I'm with that. I'm with that.
So because what they'll do, originally 2 years ago when we were talking about reform, they would say, oh, we take a constitutional amendment. We would have to tell them, no. It'll take just a statute to take it. But we're legislators off of the JMSC.
Mhm.
It'll take just a statute to give the governor appointments to members of the JMSC. So that's what we need to push our legislators.
And I would suggest, I've said this 30 seconds, indulge me. If I had one plank that I could put in the Republican Party platform, one thing, and take everything else out, ballot initiatives. You've heard like Proposition 47 and all these places where the people sign petitions. They draft the law, and if you get enough signatures, it goes on the next ballot for the general election, and if the people vote for it, it becomes a law. Without legislative, without governor signing, it becomes a lot of problems that way. Everybody in this room wants term limits. The only people opposed to it are the people who would be term limited. That's why we don't have it. Exactly. We keep asking them for it. They don't give it to us. We need to pay it.
But you pass initiatives like that, then a judge overturns it.
No, they're in half the states right now, and they're all constitutional.
I live in California, we pass it, and then the judge said it's
Oh, well,
unconstitutional.
it does have to be constitutional. You can't pass a law that says nobody can have a gun. If you wrote a ballot initiative.
All we pass is, we don't want to educate the legals.
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm just saying, the ballot initiative itself has to be constitutional under the U.S. Constitution. I'm not saying, I can tell you that this is the way forward for fixing a lot of problems.
Thank you. You guys were absolutely fabulous. I mean, the big discussion was about were we going to be able to do party business. If this is not party business, if this is not listening to people, telling people who we try to get to vote, because the key to this, along with ballot initiatives, is voter turnout. Absolutely abysmal voter turnout in the country, in Greenville. So you guys were, I just cannot thank you enough. What a blessing for driving all the way up here. You guys were a great audience. Thank you for your patience. And like we just have some small tokens. Deb said to make sure to give the right one to the right person. So thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you
So we have the credentialing report and then we
In a minute.
Madam Chairman, I'd like for a point of information for the body.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
I know you want to stand up, don't you? I just told Joe I'm numb from here down. So why don't you stand up? And while you're standing up, I want to thank the people here at Mauldin First Baptist Church. Our government started in church buildings. You know that, don't you? But I want to tell you, I ran for office in order to bring people together. I've worked hard my whole life to serve the people and be trustworthy. Since being elected, I've tried to bring this party together and represent everybody and work with everybody. I've done my best to do the same with the other officers. I've always went to Yvonne to tell her if I felt something wasn't right, or asked her to consider my ideas about changing things. I've tried to help her in her role as chairman, but as I've spoken my mind, I've had the same experience over and over. Yvonne says I'm right, and she'll fix it, but almost nothing changes. Well, how many times can a person go through that before they realize that they just need to tell somebody what's going on? That's why I sent the email out the other day. It's not okay for somebody to tell false stories about me and call me names because of how I voted. I felt like I had to publicly correct the record and not depend on anyone else to do that. We always say that we're fully transparent and people can ask questions anytime. I'm glad the 15 ECs called that special meeting. Some call it the sauna, but I am glad that they called that meeting and asked the questions of the body that needed to be heard. I think that they didn't get the answers. Over the last months, as I've been asking questions, I've now been treated how I hear them talking about being treated. They're ECs. They're in control of this meeting, along with you. I thought it was important to be able to tell the truth to everybody in this leadership group and be transparent and honest. It's important to be people of integrity in all that we do, from the little things to the big things. That's why I sent out my email. This is time to be bold. Face these issues head on, and let's fix the problem going forward. These speakers told us that we need the governor. I don't know about that. I'd love to vote on every judge. Anybody in here feel that way? I think we need to vote on every judge. And if they turn loose a murderer, they need to be voted out, or they ought to go to jail too. You know, in the old country, if you turned somebody loose for that, you had to go to jail in their place. That concludes. Let's have our conditionally.
Thank you for your remarks, Joe.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. We have 145 precincts organized. Tonight, precincts represented were 98. Out of the 98, 12 of those were proxies. So thank you for the proxies and for the ECs that sent us email, text, and showed up with papers. So we have 98 precincts represented tonight. Thank you. Oh, by the way, not all the presidents were able to go back. So we have about 5 minutes, folks, to go back. If you do not see your EC here tonight, please go back and see Ms. Holly, and she will double check to make sure that the EC and the proxy had not signed in, and she will give you, as the president, an envelope to be able to vote. So please do that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. So 5 minutes, guys, to get the voting handle. We do have a request to amend the agenda. We have the standing agenda, but we've had 2 requests. I think, Joe, you've made your remarks already, so.
Well, I've got to present these minutes.
Okay, but that's not an amendment. Those are on here. So, and then Elizabeth has an amendment to present to the agenda. We need a motion around. Sorry. Okay. Is that working?
Testing. Okay. All right. So in the old business, the approval of minutes, those are minutes from the previous EC board. Not from this EC board. I'd like to finish. Thank you.
Point of order takes precedence.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Point of order.
The
Change the agenda after it's already been started. It's out of order.
It has not been approved yet.
So the approval of minutes by a previous EC board is actually unnecessary per Robert's Rules of Order, which states that minutes that have not been approved at the end of a term are treated as having been previously approved. So I'd like to make a motion that we amend the agenda in that way.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth Scott, Greenville 21.
Okay. We need to vote on the motion? Okay. Okay.
We go into debate if you...
Okay. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, I want to make...
We're still going to look at those minutes. We're just going to remove the word approve.
Okay, so the motion on the floor then is that the word approval is removed. Is that your motion?
Yes, ma'am. If that's what you'd like it to be, that's what it will be today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Are we going into discussion now? Okay.
Well, we need to vote on the motion. So
debate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So Robert's Rules of Order 4812, and this is a little bit lengthy, and the meat is at the end, but I already told you the meat, so we'll get there. Exceptions to the rule that minutes are approved at the next regular meeting or at the end of the or at the next meeting within the session arise when the next meeting will not be held within a quarterly time interval, when the term of a specialized portion of the membership will expire before the start of the next meeting, or when, as at a final meeting of a convention, the assembly will be dissolved at the close of the present meeting. In any of these cases, minutes that have not been approved previously should be approved before final adjournment, or the assembly should authorize the executive board or a special committee to approve the minutes. The fact that the minutes are not read for approval at the next meeting does not prevent a member from having a relevant excerpt read for information, nor does it prevent the assembly in such a case from making additional corrections, then treating the minutes as having been previously approved. So at the end of the last term, any minutes that had not been approved are then treated as having been previously approved. However, it doesn't stop us from going back and talking about them, right?
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. I'm not sure why we're objecting to approving minutes. County Council has approved minutes. City Council has approved minutes. School Board has approved minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Kellywood, Pelham Falls Precinct. So I'm a little confused as to why we don't want to improve our minutes so somebody can go back. Let's say a new person comes in as an EC and they want to know what kind of business we did a year and a half ago. We don't have minutes to show that. How can we ask County Council to be accountable if they don't have minutes that we can look at? So I would like the parliamentarian, this is a point of clarification, please.
As a parliamentarian, the minutes are already approved. We're not saying we're not approving them. They are approved. We can amend them. We can comment on them. It's just that it's not that they haven't been, they are approved because the previous session of the executive committee terminated. We now have a different general session. So we're not saying we don't approve them. They are approved. We're just saying that the comment now is we're amending them, not approving them.
They are not approved, Mr. Sheen. These minutes are not approved. And I would like a point
by
of...
Robert's rules, they are approved. That's what we're saying. Is by Robert's rules, they are approved.
Point of clarification. Point of clarification, Mr. Parliamentarian. I believe we have in our rules, I'm sorry, Everett Headley, Travelers Rest 1.
Can you please state your name?
Everett Headley, Travelers Rest 1. According to our rules, which would supersede Robert's Rules of Order, it clearly stipulates that our rules are to be written up and then voted on at the next business meeting. That would supersede Robert's Rules of Order.
Actually, what we have is Robert's rules, and this is an area that's vague in terms of when the EC body has completed its 2-year term, there is a new EC body. It's a new group at that point. And so just any rules changes, for instance, that this body makes right now, if they're not approved at the next convention, then we're back to where we were.
So your ruling is that Robert's Rules of Order supersedes our set of rules when it comes to the approval of minutes.
No, that's not, I'm not saying
I'm
that.
trying to get clarification on that point, so
Right.
that's what I'm asking.
So we approve minutes at each meeting for the previous meeting.
These
We do
minutes
that.
have never been approved by any...
These meetings, can I finish, please?
Sure.
We approve the minutes at each meeting, at the following meeting for the previous meeting. These minutes apparently were not approved at the following meeting, but when that session completed, all minutes from that session were now done and are considered approved at that point. We have a new group, so it's whatever happened with the old group, that old group is over. So now we're a new group as of the convention, as of reorg.
Okay,
when we
I'm
created new ECs.
going to appeal the decision of the chair or appeal the decision of the parliamentarian to the body that this body should be able to vote on these minutes and approve them.
Yes, he could do that, and then, yes.
Okay.
But he has to have a second.
Okay, sure. Exactly.
I'll second that. But I had a point of clarification, so I'm not sure if I should ask that while they're looking at the appeal. Okay.
So what is your point of clarification, please? Right, yeah. So do you have a motion to?
No, he just...
Are you seconding the motion for the appeal?
I just seconded the appealing of the chair.
Okay.
Yes.
Appeal the chair's rulings. All right. So we have a motion to appeal the ruling of the chair. Well, there is no ruling. I mean, this was a point of...
The ruling of the chair would be, assuming you rule that way, is that those minutes were already approved. That was based upon the parliamentarian's advice.
Right, exactly. Well,
can
the
I
reality is that from the ruling of the chair is that we have the parliamentarian advice that we do not need to approve them, but since these minutes, the agenda actually said they were on the schedule to be approved, and that was based on parliament advice from another parliamentarian that said that it was okay for us to approve them. I am comfortable if the body chooses, so I will ask the body to vote as if we would like to vote on approving these minutes.
Well, before we do that, can the parliamentarian please explain to the body that a motion that carried and was passed by this current body is now going to be overturned?
No, I did not say. That's why it was on the
No,
agenda.
I'm asking the parliamentarian if they can add some clarification to that. Our body, September 14th,
Right.
passed that motion to approve these outstanding minutes. So now you will be overturning an already voted on motion by this current body.
No. Well, because the vote at their meeting in September,
Yes.
that is why these minutes are as part of the compliance, that is why they are on the agenda for approval, to be voted on. That's exactly why they're there. So that ruling has not been overruled.
Point of order. When somebody appeals a ruling of the chair, it's not debatable. It has to be dealt with. This needs to be voted on right now.
Well, but the chair has not ruled that we are not going to vote. The chair has... Okay. The chair has not ruled that there will not be a vote. The reason that this item is on the agenda is part of the compliance, and because of advice from another parliamentarian that said it was appropriate. We have a new advice, a new suggestion, but it's no detriment to the body to vote on the approval of these minutes. So the chair has not ruled against that. Are we clear? Well, so now all we need to do is vote. Okay. So would you like to make a motion?
But there is a motion.
Oh,
You got a motion
to appeal, but why do we have a motion? But what are you appealing if there's... Okay. What do you
The
appeal?
parliamentarian made a ruling.
Well, the parliamentarian offered advice to the chair.
He was the one who made the statement.
The parliament.
He is your parliamentarian.
Yes, but he made advice. He suggested, yes. She's the chair. He did not make a ruling, and I just explained that the advice had been rejected, and we were going to vote. Come to order, please. It's getting late. We only got a few more minutes. So we will take a vote on the approval of these minutes. Okay?
All three?
Yes, that's why they're, yes.
I have an amendment for the October the 3rd.
Okay, that's fine, but let's vote on, you have to vote on approving them first, and then they're admitted.
You have to get them on the floor. And are they on the floor?
Well, they're on the,
Okay, if they're on the floor, then I want to amend the October the 3rd because they're not.
okay, come to order. Okay, you're out of order, Joe. So we will we need a ruling from the parliamentarian. Do we need to accept and then amend, approve?
If you've not made a ruling, I'm not actually trying to think of where we are.
Yeah.
So if you've not made a ruling, we're back to Elizabeth's motion, which was to modify the agenda.
Oh, I see, yes.
And the only modification that we chose to make was to remove the word approval. So the minutes then, if we just remove the word approval, the minutes remain on the agenda. So if they want to discuss the minutes, that still remains on the old business agenda, but there's no reason to approve them. We could amend them when we get there if we wanted to.
Okay. Well, so so your motion was, so we need to have a vote on your motion, which was to amend the agenda and remove the word approve. Okay?
Right.
And we have it do,
Parliamentary inquiry.
yes.
If we move forward on this motion, again, it's the chair is either accepting this motion as stated and moving forward and stating that the minutes have been approved without a vote, except for this vote here that we've quote-unquote approved them. So is it the ruling of the chair that we're going to move forward on that motion, on the motion that was just made?
We're going,
by Elizabeth?
we're going to have a vote from the body on the motion.
Okay.
Okay, we have Elizabeth's motion to remove approval. We have Terry's second. So. Yeah. But I've lost. There was no ruling on the appeal. Yeah. Appeal of what? Yeah, there is no. Remove. Oh, you're saying not move. You're saying remove. Okay. Okay. So the appeal. Yeah, because I can't understand what he's saying. Yeah. Yeah, you're talking. Yeah. So we're moving the appeal.
Anyone who speaks is out of order.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Be recognized.
Right. Exactly.
If they're not recognized.
Yeah. So we have so the appeal was made. I've completely lost track of what the appeal. So the appeal needs to be removed because there's nothing.
Is the parliamentarian making the ruling that I made an improper motion?
The chair never ruled for you to appeal her ruling.
You gave advice.
I gave advice to the chair. I didn't give advice to
Yeah.
the body. I gave advice to the chair.
And the chair has not accepted.
Parliamentarian does make rulings. It's up to the chair, obviously, to accept them. I get that point.
Okay. So we can take a vote on as soon as we resolve this issue, we can simply vote.
I'll remove the appeal on
Thank you.
the decision of the chair.
Thank you.
I do appreciate Elizabeth bringing that to the attention of the body. However, it does still go against what we already voted on in September. We did vote to approve these minutes. So a vote today cannot undo that vote that was already taken. Well, that's not what you asked to do. You didn't ask to overturn the motion that was voted on in September. Why are we overturning that vote? Everybody thought they were wasting their time that night, and all we have to do is comply with that motion. Why are we wasting our time now trying to overturn that?
We're ready for a vote.
I'm just hoping that you guys understand what's happening. We voted to do this in September.
Okay.
We haven't done it.
We are going to vote.
I am not out of order. I have the microphone.
Yeah. The vote is on the amendment, the compliance with the motion from.
May I amend the amendment? I'm going to put this whole thing into one package because we now have taken the time to go back and look at Robert's rules and understand.
Are 3 minutes
So I'd like to amend the amendment to state that we are going to
amend your motion.
Amend. Oh, I can't. Never mind. We're just approving minutes. I cannot create a motion during approval of minutes.
Okay.
So I still have to go back. Do we have a deadline?
Okay. What is?
What we are doing is against Robert's rules. It is not. I mean, you can always appease people, but what I'm telling you is that what we did in September was out of order. So,
okay,
for what it's worth.
Yes, a point of information. Thank you. Okay.
Are you removing your agenda request, your request to change the agenda?
To appease the people, I will move the request to amend,
excellent.
and I would like the people to consider the way Robert's rules actually reads. So,
Right, thank you. We appreciate it. So right, exactly. So we will approve the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. So we can finish quickly if we have a vote to approve the agenda as it stands. And the next item would be this vote on the minutes. And so can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Okay, a second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, I. All right. Okay, the agenda is approved. So the next item on the agenda is the vote to approve minutes of January 31st, January 7th. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Well, reality is that we have 5 minutes. So, thank you. Point of order. The next item is my chairman's report, which the chairman is willing to forego. And then we have minutes of the October treasurer's report, and then October 2nd minutes. So what? Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then the October 2nd minutes. Do we have a motion to approve those minutes, which are not old? Do you have a motion to approve the minutes of the October 2nd? Do we, as submitted? Who was that? Okay. Who made the motion to approve those minutes?
I have amendments to recommend.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm getting ready. Are we approving minutes before we make amendments? Or what's happening?
Yes, the motion is to approve the minutes, yes, that were submitted with your call to meeting.
Okay, well, I have other amendments to recommend, so.
You have amendments?
Yes, corrections to make to the October 23 minutes. Is that what we're doing? October 23, what are we doing?
October 2nd?
Right, of 23, correct? That's where we are.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? My name is Tiffany Mauk, M-A-U-K. I am the EC of Frohawk. We ready? Okay. On the first page, you stated that the Frohawk EC interrupted without being recognized by the chair. I made a point of information which allows interruption and does not require the person to be acknowledged. So I would request that those words be stricken from the record. Just Frohawk EC asked about reviewing minutes. And then, yeah, that's all. Thanks. The 7th paragraph. It's already been sent to them. They have a copy. It was with everything. The 7th paragraph, it starts with Frohawk EC interrupted without being recognized by the chair. I made a point of information which doesn't require being recognized, and it does allow for interruption. So I just wanted those words stricken from the record. Do y'all have everything you need?
I second. Everett Headley. Everett Headley, Travelers Rest 1, second.
Can you repeat what we're voting on, what the motion is, please?
It's not dead either. I moved that we would approve October the 3rd, 2022, January the 7th, 2023, and January 31st, 2023. And I have an amendment for the 3rd.
Give a second. All in favor?
Now we can do addendums.
Okay, now we can do the addendum.
Okay, I've got an amendment. Well, it's a total write-up.
I think you have to, can you submit this to?
I can submit that.
Right, exactly, because we don't want to be rude to our church.
Who do I submit it to?
You submit it to our secretary.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as I can do an amendment, please, on one of them, okay?
I got a parliamentary question. How in the world do you vote on something that you weren't even in office at that time? I was not in office. There's probably one or two other people here that weren't either.
That's why it's important to do it right after it happens, and that didn't happen. So we're trying to get minutes that never happened like that.
How can we be asked to approve
Because
something that we weren't in office for?
I understand. It's very frustrating.
Oh, and I'm Steve Hudson from Piedmont.
So that was the reason for Elizabeth Jean's earlier motion, but because of all the controversy, we backed off on that. We can do amendments now, and the amendments are what this body will be voting on. But you're absolutely correct, sir, and that's why Robert's rules stated what it stated, is that this is a different body, so this body is not really in a position to vote on what the other body did, because there are folks like you who weren't there before. Well, we would do that just to try to keep peace and keep things moving. At least Elizabeth Jean was through that. So, not we have.
But if the parliamentarian could remind the body that Robert's Rules of Order does not supersede our own Greenville County rules, that would be nice, so everybody understands that. So Robert Rules is the bottom underpinning of what we do. We have Greenville County rules on top of that. But I have an amendment to the January 31st minutes, and I don't know if Joe Dill has. Do you have an amendment for that, of changes on that set of minutes? Okay. Those minutes actually said a budget as presented, and there was no budget presented. There was only a verbal sentence of this was going to be the same as last year. And so I would like those words as presented taken out of the minutes. And I would also like to have that budget removed because that budget was not provided at the time that meeting took place. Kellywood, Pelham Falls, sorry. What? Okay, if you could add an amendment, please, however you want to write that, and just say a budget was not presented. I have it. I can give it to you. Okay. Okay, so people are understanding, well, okay.
Democrat-y.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Exactly. All right. I think that brings us to new business. Right. Well, only because people need the amendments. Are there people that feel they can vote without seeing the amendments? No, so they can't vote. No. So that's not a ruling. Huh? So the action was that Kelly agreed to submit an amendment. We will show your amendment, Joe, because I don't think everybody has seen it. Well, you didn't give it to me until tonight. Well, I'm sorry. All right, guys. Good for you. All right, guys, it's getting late. Yes. Yeah. Motion to adjourn. Second. A second. All in favor? Good job.